People like you don't belong in this lobby, let alone in our presidential suite. That was the very first sentence Ava heard when she stepped into the grand marble lobby of the Eden Lux Hotel in downtown Atlanta. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't said with shame. It was said aloud, clear, cold, and with a smile. And for a moment, the air stood still. Ava's fingers clutched her mother's hand just a little tighter, and her mother, Dr. Naomi Ellis, stood still, like stone, not because she was afraid, but because she had expected this exact moment. Still, hearing it said to her face, right in front of her 13-year-old daughter, in a place she technically owned, it cut deep. Before we go further, I want to know something. Where are you watching from today? Go ahead and drop your city in the comments. We read every single one. And while you're here, don't forget to hit that like button if this story already has you gritting your teeth. And make sure you're subscribed, because what happens in the next 10 minutes, it's going to change everything. Naomi Ellis wasn't a stranger to disrespect. She was a black woman, a mother, and the newly appointed CEO of Eden Lux International, a luxury hotel chain known for its immaculate lobbies and exclusive clientele. What most of the staff inside this particular branch didn't know, however, was that the woman standing in front of them today in a gray blazer and modest black flats wasn't just another guest. She was their boss. And this visit? It wasn't just for rest. It was for truth. You see, 2 weeks earlier, Naomi had received an anonymous report that black guests at this very hotel were being turned away, downgraded, or mistreated under the guise of overbooking. So today, she walked in without warning, dressed like any other guest, using her initials N.W. Ellis on the reservation. No fanfare, no entourage, just her and Ava. The moment they entered the lobby, Naomi noticed it, the subtle glances, the lack of welcome. The bellhop who helped a white couple walk in after her, ignoring Naomi's eye contact completely. Still, she stayed calm. That's how these things work. You wait, you observe, and you let them show you who they really are. She walked Ava toward the long marble counter beneath the golden sign that read, "Welcome to Eden Lux." The line wasn't long. 2 people were ahead of her. Ava whispered, "Mom, are you sure this is the right place?" Naomi smiled gently. "It's exactly the right place. Sweetheart." When they reached the front, the man behind the counter barely looked up. A 30-something white man named Jake, blonde, with a trimmed beard and an overly forced smile that somehow didn't reach his eyes. "Yes?" he asked. "I have a reservation under N.W. Ellis, Presidential Suite," Naomi said, handing over her ID and confirmation email from the app. Jake stared at the phone, then at Naomi, then back at the phone. His expression changed, subtly, but enough to read. He didn't expect her to be her. "One moment," he muttered, then turned to his screen and started typing with stiff fingers. From the back room, another voice chimed in. "I'll handle it," said Emily Carter, the front office manager. She emerged in a sharp navy suit, clipboard in hand, with a voice that oozed authority. But the smile on her face when she saw Naomi was anything but welcoming. She looked her over like she didn't belong, like her shoes were too plain, like her skin was too dark, like her daughter standing quietly beside her didn't deserve to be there. "I'm sorry, Ms. Ellis," Emily said, though her tone lacked any true regret. "It appears your suite has been reassigned. Unfortunately, we had a system update last night and there's just no availability at the moment." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I confirmed this booking 2 days ago, paid in full. You're saying you gave it away?" Emily's smile widened. "Well, perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at one of our sister properties. There's a very nice one just 2 blocks down. A bit more accessible." "Accessible?" Naomi repeated, the word catching like a thorn. Emily leaned in slightly, dropping her voice to a tone that might have sounded helpful, if it wasn't so filled with poison. "Our presidential guests tend to expect a certain standard." That's when Ava heard it. That's when the words were said. "People like you don't belong in this lobby, let alone in our presidential suite." Jake didn't flinch. Emily didn't blink. Naomi took a breath and exhaled slowly, locking eyes with her daughter. "You doing okay, baby?" she asked. Ava nodded, trying to hold in her confusion, but the crack in her voice betrayed her. "Why are they talking to us like that?" Before Naomi could answer, she noticed 2 more white guests enter the lobby, dressed in jeans and sneakers, loud, laughing, and yet. Jake greeted them with warmth and enthusiasm. "Welcome to Eden Lux," he said, smiling like it was second nature. Naomi turned back to Emily. "I'd like to speak to your general manager." "I'm afraid he's not available," Emily replied quickly. "And honestly, there's really nothing more we can do. As I said, we're fully booked." Naomi didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and sent one message to a single contact. It read, "It's time." Then she turned to Ava and whispered, "We're going to learn something important today. Not just about how people see us, but how we respond." And with that, she waited. Because what Emily Carter didn't know, what Jake hadn't realized, what every guest and staff member in that glittering, perfect lobby was about to find out, was that Naomi Ellis didn't just belong in the presidential suite. She owned the floor it stood on, and she had just walked into the lion's den with her daughter by her side, to burn the whole rotten system down from within. Emily Carter didn't step aside. She simply stood there with her arms folded, staring Naomi down like she was some kind of inconvenience in heels. And Jake, now comfortably behind her, offered nothing but silence. The 2 of them, standing in front of a black mother and her daughter, had made it perfectly clear. They weren't just denying them a room, they were denying them dignity. Naomi didn't blink. She didn't give them the outrage they were expecting. Instead, she reached calmly into her handbag, pulled out the same printed reservation confirmation, and placed it flat on the marble counter. "Here's the email from your system. Paid in full, presidential suite, confirmation number, dates, and my name, N.W. Ellis," she said quietly. "So now I'll ask again. Are you refusing service to me and my daughter?" Ava stood beside her, clutching the strap of her school satchel, eyes wide and glistening. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to watching her mother be ignored, spoken over, or quietly dismissed. Naomi had always been the woman who got things done, who walked into boardrooms and left with decisions made in her favor. But now, here, in a place she helped finance, surrounded by people she paid salaries to, she was being treated like a threat. Emily tapped her acrylic nails slowly on the counter, pretending to scroll through the screen in front of her, though it was clear she wasn't reading anything. "As I said," she replied, voice clipped, "your suite appears to have been reassigned. There was a glitch during the system reset. You're welcome to wait in the lobby until something opens. Maybe a standard double." Naomi didn't move. "That's not what I booked," she said, her voice calm. "I didn't pay for a standard room, and I didn't bring my daughter here to be seated in a lobby while you accommodate everyone else." Jake suddenly chimed in from the side, his tone smug. "Ma'am, I think we've done all we can. Maybe try the Hilton down the block, or the Royal Inn. Rates are more..." Accessible. The word hung in the air again. Accessible. Like a dog whistle wearing a suit. Naomi tilted her head slightly, as if studying them. Tell me, she said, do you say that to all your guests, or just the ones who look like us? Emily let out a soft, humorless laugh. I'm not going to stand here and be accused of anything. Ms. Ellis, we treat everyone the same. We simply don't have the room. Behind them, a white couple in jogging suits, clearly walk-in guests, stepped up to the adjacent counter. Jake glanced at them, then whispered something to another staff member. Within seconds, room keys were handed over, and the couple was on their way to the elevators. Ava saw it. Naomi saw it. And for a second, Ava's small voice broke the quiet. Why are they getting a room? She asked, almost in a whisper. We were here first. Naomi placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, gently, protectively. Emily's tone sharpened. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to stop raising your voice. This is a place of business. I haven't raised my voice, Naomi said, still measured. I've only asked for what I paid for. You're disrupting the lobby, Jake added. We can't have that. Do you want me to call security? And there it was, the default threat, the one that so often follows black presence in white spaces, removal, not reasoning, not resolution, just removal. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. Then she looked down at her daughter, who was now visibly shrinking under the weight of embarrassment, and said gently, Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Don't let them make you feel small. But Ava was trembling now, not just because of how they were being treated, but because she realized something she had never seen before. Even her mother, the strongest person she knew, could be disrespected just for existing in the wrong skin, and that hurt more than anything else. Just then, a deep voice came from behind. Is there a problem here? It was Tom Hutchins, the daytime security officer, a broad man in his 50s with a firm jaw and the kind of stance that said he didn't ask questions twice. He looked straight at Emily. She nodded and said, This guest is being uncooperative. We've offered her alternative options, but she's making a scene. Tom turned his attention to Naomi and Ava. His tone was flat. I'm going to need you two to step aside. There's other guests trying to check in. Naomi stared at him, then at the growing number of people in the lobby beginning to notice. She saw the glances. Some were indifferent. A few were uncomfortable, but no one said a word. Except one, in the far corner, seated near the cafe. A woman in a long green dress and gold-rimmed glasses stood up slowly. She was watching the entire thing with her phone in her hand. And now, she hit Go Live. I just want to be clear, she said loudly, panning her camera across the scene. This hotel is refusing service to a black woman and her child, who have a paid reservation, and now they're threatening to call security, while letting other guests, white guests, check in without issue. Am I understanding that right? Emily froze. Jake turned red. Tom adjusted his posture, and the energy in the room shifted. People started whispering. One guest took out a phone. Another stepped to the side to record. Ma'am, please put your phone away, Tom said quickly, but the woman ignored him. Nah, not today. Not while this baby's watching her mother get humiliated. Naomi looked at the woman, Carla James, just long enough to offer a nod. Carla nodded back. Keep standing tall, she said. They ain't ready for who you really are. And Naomi smiled, not out of happiness, but out of something deeper, because she knew this wasn't the end of the confrontation. It was the beginning. And she wasn't here just to endure the insult. She was here to hold up a mirror. Ava clutched her hand, whispered, Mom. What now? Naomi looked her daughter in the eye and said softly, Now, sweetheart. We let them finish the show. because they don't even know they're performing. Tom Hutchins adjusted his belt and took a step closer to Naomi and Ava, trying to assert himself with presence alone. "I'm gonna ask you one last time," he said, his voice calm but laced with warning. "You need to step aside and leave the check-in area." His hand hovered near the radio clipped to his side, like it was routine, like the next step after ask was always remove. Naomi didn't budge. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly, the way someone does when they realize something is both offensive and deeply expected. "We're not causing a disturbance," she said, her tone still measured. "We're standing quietly, and I've paid for a room, so unless you treat every guest like this, I'd suggest you stop embarrassing yourselves." Ava, still holding her mother's hand, looked up nervously. The fear in her eyes wasn't just about being thrown out. It was about not understanding why they were being treated this way. She'd grown up hearing her mother talk about dignity, respect, and progress. But now, in a bright hotel lobby surrounded by people pretending not to notice, none of those values were protecting her, and that innocence, whatever was left of it, was breaking. Across the room, Carla James was still recording, and more phones had gone up. Guests were no longer just observers. They were participants, some whispering, others filming quietly behind handbags and suit jackets. Still, no one interrupted. No one confronted the staff. Only Carla stood tall, phone steady, eyes locked on Naomi. "They think this woman doesn't belong here," she said into her live stream, her voice sharp but calm. "But she paid for that room, and y'all better believe the internet's gonna know how Eden Lux handles its guests." Emily Carter turned toward Tom, whispering something harshly under her breath. He nodded once and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need another officer in the lobby," he said into the mic, as if Naomi were some kind of threat needing backup. That was when Ava started to cry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Silent tears rolling down her cheeks as she clutched her mother's arm, her young body shaking. "Why are they doing this to us?" she whispered. "We didn't do anything." Naomi wrapped her arm around her daughter and knelt beside her. "I know, baby. I know. You did nothing wrong. This is about them, not us." That moment, the mother on her knees, comforting her daughter in the middle of a marble hotel lobby, was when everything changed. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a portrait of injustice, and even those who had been silent began to feel it. An older white man, seated near the concierge desk, slowly stood up. His name was Ethan Clark, a retired educator visiting Atlanta for a conference. He looked at Tom, then at Emily, and said with quiet authority, "This isn't how you treat people. I've been sitting here the whole time. That woman hasn't raised her voice once. She hasn't threatened anyone. She's shown more composure than most folks twice her age." Emily's expression tightened. "Sir, please return to your seat." But Ethan didn't move. "No," he said, voice louder this time. "No, I won't. Because I know what I'm seeing. You're escalating a situation that didn't need to be escalated. And that child," he pointed gently toward Ava, "deserves better than to watch her mother be humiliated." Tom looked uneasy now, his grip on control slipping. The lobby felt different, charged. Naomi stood up slowly, guiding Ava to her feet. She glanced at Ethan and offered a faint nod of gratitude. Then she turned back to Emily. "You say you're fully booked. You say it's a system error. But what I see is a lobby full of white guests being welcomed while my daughter and I are told we're causing a scene. You say you're offering solutions. But what you're offering is a lower standard you think we should settle for. That's not customer service. That's discrimination." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned to Jake for backup, but he looked away, suddenly fascinated by something on his monitor. Carla, still streaming, spoke again. "The live's at 12,000 now," she said. "People watching from New York to Texas. Keep talking. Emily, let them see everything." A hotel staff member, Linda Owens, stood at the edge of the chaos, eyes wide with disbelief. She was new, hired just 2 weeks ago. She had no real authority, but she knew what she was watching was wrong. Slowly, she stepped forward, hesitating as she reached the counter. I checked the system," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "The suite wasn't reassigned. It's still in the system. It's booked under N.W. Ellis. Status confirmed. I saw it an hour ago." Everyone turned. Emily froze. "Linda," she hissed, "that's not your place." But the damage was done. A truth had been spoken, not by the powerful, but by someone who still believed her job meant something. Naomi looked at Linda, then back at Emily. "So we're done pretending?" she asked. "Because your employee just confirmed what I already knew, that you saw my name, you saw my face, and you made a decision." Carla leaned in toward her phone. "She's right. Y'all, you watched that happen." Ethan folded his arms, standing behind Naomi now. "Is there a manager above you?" he asked Emily. "Someone who isn't this?" Emily snapped. "The general manager is off-site today. I'm in charge." Naomi smiled slightly. "Not for long," she said under her breath, and then, quietly, she pulled out her phone, opened one screen, tapped a single name, Rachel Kim. She typed 3 words. "It's time now." Ava, still wiping her tears, whispered, "Is everything okay now?" Naomi bent down again, kissed her forehead, and said gently, "Everything's about to be." And with that, she turned back toward the front entrance, waiting, because the real reckoning hadn't even begun. Not yet. It started with the low hum of a black SUV engine pulling up to the curb. The doorman, unaware of the storm brewing inside, walked toward the vehicle with his usual charm, ready to open the door with a smile. But he paused when the back door opened on its own and Rachel Kim stepped out. She didn't need introductions. She didn't look around for permission. She didn't even glance at the grand facade of the Eden Lux Hotel. She already knew the truth about this place, and she came prepared to expose it. Rachel was Naomi's right hand, a sharp, poised Korean-American woman in her early 30s, with a sleek black pantsuit, a tablet under one arm, and purpose in her stride. The kind of woman who didn't waste words and didn't need to raise her voice to get things done. She walked straight through the front doors of the lobby, past the bellhop, past the concierge, past the murmurs, and directly to where Naomi stood. Phones were still recording. Carla's live stream was still active. Jake pretended to be busy on his screen. Emily froze, her spine stiffening as if she suddenly sensed something wasn't right. And Tom, who had just radioed for backup, stepped back without meaning to. Naomi didn't say a word when Rachel arrived. She didn't need to. Rachel handed her the iPad and a discreet wireless connection key. "It's all loaded," she said. "Footage, system logs, emails, live confirmations, all of it." Naomi took the tablet with a nod and calmly walked toward the center of the lobby. The room, now filled with dozens of guests, had gone strangely quiet. Whispers had faded into silence. Everyone could feel it. Something was shifting. Even those who didn't understand what was happening could sense the gravity building. Naomi stopped in front of the front desk, facing Emily. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned the iPad around and tapped the screen twice. The hotel's large digital wall display behind the desk, which normally cycled through promotional images and welcome messages, went dark for a second. Then it lit up with a single image, The official Eden Lux International CEO announcement, dated just 1 month earlier. Her name, Dr. Naomi W. Ellis, in bold. Her photo beside it. The screen changed again, this time showing a real-time booking confirmation pulled directly from the hotel's own system. Room 1401, the presidential suite, status confirmed. Guest N. W. Ellis, paid in full. Emily's face drained of color. Jake looked like someone had unplugged his nervous system. Tom muttered something unintelligible under his breath and instinctively stepped out of view. "That's not possible," Emily blurted out, her voice cracking for the first time all day. "That can't be real. There must be." "A mistake?" Naomi finished the sentence for her, her voice calm, firm, and quiet enough that you had to stop breathing to hear every word. "No, Miss Carter, the only mistake here was yours." Carla gasped on stream. Ava, still holding her mother's hand, looked up at the screen, then back at the woman who gave her life, and found herself smiling through her tears. "Mom," she whispered, "they didn't know, did they?" "No, baby," Naomi whispered back. "They didn't know, but now they do." Naomi turned to the room, her voice still soft, still steady. "I didn't come here today as your boss," she said, speaking not just to the staff, but to every guest, every camera, every viewer watching from behind their screens. "I came here as a mother, as a guest, as someone who's heard one too many stories of people who look like me, being told they don't belong in places their money already paid for. So I booked this suite, quietly, and I waited, not for special treatment, but for equal treatment, and what I received instead was confirmation." Her words landed like thunder wrapped in velvet. No shouting, no fury, just facts. Emily tried to speak, but her mouth opened without sound. Jake looked down at the counter like it might swallow him, and Linda, the one staff member who had told the truth, stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. "This hotel," Naomi continued, "represents the face of a luxury brand, and what you showed my daughter was not luxury. It was legacy, a legacy of exclusion, covered in polite language and false smiles, a legacy that ends today." Then, Rachel stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "Effective immediately," she announced. "The following employees are suspended pending internal investigation: Front Office Manager Emily Carter, Front Desk Agent Jake Reynolds, and Security Officer Tom Hutchins. Their conduct, captured on camera and verified through system logs, is under formal review for policy violation and discriminatory behavior." The words fell like a gavel. Emily gasped. "You can't do this," she said. "You're not allowed to just walk in and—" "Fire the people who harassed the CEO of this company in front of her daughter," Rachel interrupted. "Actually, we can—" "And we just did," Carla whispered to her audience. "Y'all, I don't even have words right now. This is what justice looks like." Naomi looked toward Linda. The young woman stood with her arms by her side, unsure whether to be terrified or hopeful. Naomi offered a slight nod. "Thank you for speaking up," she said. "That takes more courage than some people ever find in their whole lives." Linda's lips trembled. "I just did what was right. And that's all I ever ask," Naomi said. Across the lobby, Ethan Clark stepped forward again. "Dr. Ellis," he said, his voice warm. "If there's anything I can do." "You already did it," Naomi replied. "You stood up when it mattered. Thank you." Tom had already removed his badge. Emily stormed toward the office without another word. Jake simply disappeared, and in the middle of that grand lobby. Naomi turned to her daughter and gently said, "Let's go to our room." Ava nodded, but before they moved, she looked up and asked, "Will it always be like this?" Naomi paused for a moment. Then she smiled. Not because things were okay, but because she still believed they could be. "No," she said, "not if we keep showing them who we are." And with that, they walked toward the elevator, past the shocked guests, past the frozen staff, past the cameras and whispers. Not because they were running from anything, but because they had already won. The elevator doors had barely closed before the guests erupted into murmurs, camera lights still blinking from pockets and purses, and staff members scrambling to understand what had just happened. But for Naomi Ellis, the moment was far from over. As she and Ava ascended quietly toward the suite she had already paid for, her mind wasn't focused on revenge, it was focused on resolution, because what had just taken place in that lobby was not an isolated incident. It wasn't just about Emily Carter or Jake Reynolds or even Tom Hutchins. It was about a culture, a quiet code that existed beneath polished marble floors and five-star service. One that said, in unspoken terms, some guests belong more than others, and Naomi knew better than anyone that policies didn't change people. But exposure could move mountains. The elevator chimed softly as they reached the 14th floor. Ava stepped out first, her fingers still laced in her mother's hand, and together they entered the presidential suite, pristine, elegant, and silent. Naomi walked straight to the glass wall that overlooked the city and stood for a moment, watching the skyline. "It's beautiful," Ava whispered, as if unsure she was allowed to say it. Naomi smiled. "Yes, it is. But beauty doesn't excuse ignorance, and silence never changed anything." She turned back, took a deep breath, and made a call. Not to her assistant, not to the board, but to the Eden Lux Internal Communications Director. "I want to issue a public statement," she said calmly. "Today, not about what happened to me, but what's going to happen next." Downstairs, Rachel was still coordinating with security and HR, arranging transport for the suspended staff and organizing a temporary replacement team for the afternoon shift. Guests continued to mill around the lobby in awe, talking about the reveal like it was a scene from a courtroom drama. Carla James, now seated again, was fielding comments from thousands of viewers across the country, her live stream still active. "I didn't come here to film anything today," she told the screen. "But what I saw, that was bigger than a video. That was history. That little girl, that woman, they held their ground, and the truth showed up in a suit." Meanwhile, Linda Owens had been pulled into a back office where two HR officers, newly arrived from Eden Lux Regional Headquarters, sat with tablets and notebooks, collecting her statement. She spoke nervously but clearly, recounting the moment she saw Naomi's name in the system and the immediate tension in the air when Emily realized who the guest was. "It was like they didn't even care what was confirmed," she said. "They saw a black woman in front of the word presidential, and their brains just shut off." Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking, because now, telling the truth wasn't a risk. It was the beginning of reform. 2 hours later, Naomi returned to the lobby, not as a guest this time, but as the CEO. Her blazer pressed, her posture unshaken. She walked calmly across the polished floor, flanked by Rachel and two members of the corporate accountability team. There was no microphone, no press conference, just Naomi and her voice, standing in the same spot where she'd been humiliated hours before. "Some of you may know who I am now," she began, looking around the room. "And some of you knew long before the announcement. But it's not my title that matters here. It's my presence. Because when I walked in earlier today, without a name badge or a security detail, I was treated like a threat, not a guest. And not a single person in that moment thought to stop it. Except one." She gestured toward Linda, who stood nervously near the elevator bank. "And to her, I say thank you. for remembering that policies mean nothing if people lack the courage to apply them fairly. Naomi's voice never rose, but her words filled every inch of that lobby. She continued, "Let's be clear. What happened to me today has happened to countless others. People who didn't have a title to fall back on. People who were told, directly or indirectly, that they weren't welcome in places they had every right to be. That stops here. That stops now." The guests who had once watched in silence now listened intently. Some even clapped, cautiously at first, then louder as her message sank in. "Effective immediately," she went on. "We're launching a full internal audit of every Eden Lux property across the country. We'll review training, hiring practices, complaint records, and guest interactions, because no one else should have to prove they're worthy of basic respect." Rachel stepped forward briefly, holding a printed copy of the new initiative. "It's called the Equal First Impressions Program. It's mandatory, and it starts today." Naomi took the folder and held it up. "Every staff member will undergo recertification in equity-based hospitality, reviewed quarterly by third-party compliance, and if you don't pass, you won't work here. Because luxury isn't a marble floor. It's the feeling that you matter the moment you walk through the door." Then Naomi walked toward Linda and placed the folder in her hands. "You're not just part of this change," she said gently. "You're the reason it started." Linda's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. Naomi smiled. "You told the truth when it cost you something. That's always special." At the edge of the crowd, Ethan Clark nodded quietly to himself, and Ava, standing beside her mother, watched everything unfold, not with fear, but with pride. She squeezed Naomi's hand and said, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Naomi looked down and said, "You already are," as the guests began to applaud, as the live streams ended, and as the lobby returned to its polished calm. A single phrase on the hotel's wall display blinked into view beneath the Eden Lux logo. It read, "Every guest is a VIP, no exceptions." And beneath that, for the first time, a new signature, Naomi W. Ellis, CEO. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just needed to show up, as herself. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her room, she reclaimed the standard. The next morning, the energy inside Eden Lux Atlanta was unrecognizable. What had once been a space filled with quiet tension and hidden prejudice now pulsed with a kind of solemn awareness. Like the building itself understood something had changed. No voices raised, no jokes whispered behind counters. Just a quiet sort of reckoning. The lobby smelled like fresh polish, but even that couldn't scrub away what had happened the day before. And it wasn't supposed to. Because the point was never to erase it. The point was to rebuild from it, openly. Naomi arrived early. No cameras, no live streams, no press, just purpose. She met briefly with the corporate transition team, reviewed the full misconduct report, and signed a single directive. Within hours, it was done. Emily Carter's employment had been terminated with cause. Jake Reynolds was dismissed as well. Tom Hutchins was replaced by a contracted security supervisor pending retraining for the entire department. The names on office doors were already being peeled off. Lanyards and key cards collected without ceremony. But none of it was rushed. Everything Naomi did came with intention, because the goal was never to punish for punishment's sake. It was to send a message that culture, real, lasting culture, starts with accountability. In the staff lounge, Linda Owens sat stiffly in a chair she had never used before, the manager's temporary desk. She hadn't asked for it. But when Naomi called her into the office earlier that morning, she didn't ask either. "I don't want you to be scared of this opportunity," Naomi had told her. "I want you to grow into it. You showed us something real. Integrity. That's rare. Don't shrink now. Linda had nodded through tears she didn't let fall. She wasn't used to being seen like that. Most of her life had been about staying out of the way. But for the first time, she realized that speaking up hadn't destroyed her career. It had elevated it. By noon, she was reviewing shift assignments with new clarity. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a stakeholder. Upstairs, Ava sat by the tall windows of the presidential suite. Legs crossed under her, a book open in her lap. But she wasn't reading. She was thinking, processing. Her gaze was fixed on the Atlanta skyline, but her mind was still back in the lobby, in the looks, the words, the humiliation, and the shift. "I didn't know people could be so bold," she said quietly. Naomi, sipping coffee nearby, looked up. "You mean cruel?" "No," Ava said. "I mean brave, like you, and Linda, and that woman who filmed everything." Naomi put down her cup, walked over, and sat beside her daughter. "It's not always bravery, baby. Sometimes it's just knowing you've had enough." Ava turned to face her. "Were you scared?" Naomi paused before answering. "Yes. Not for me. For you. I didn't want that to be your memory of this place." Ava nodded slowly. Thoughtful. "It is. But it's also the memory of how it ended." Naomi smiled at that. "Then we're both okay." Later that afternoon, the corporate regional manager arrived to formally announce the internal audit of all Eden Lux locations across the southeastern United States. Naomi didn't linger for the speech. She'd already done what she came to do. Now, it was time to let the system run and make sure the structure would stand without her needing to hold every beam. As she walked through the lobby one last time, she passed by Linda, now confidently training 2 new hires. She passed by Ethan Clark, who had returned to check out and offered a respectful nod from across the room. And she passed Carla James, seated again at the cafe with her laptop open and earbuds in. Carla looked up and smiled. "Your story changed people," she said. "Not just the ones who were here, the ones who saw it, the ones who felt it." Naomi nodded gently. "That little moment wasn't mine alone. We all carried it." Ava followed close behind, carrying her backpack, no longer hunched like the day before. Her steps were lighter, her eyes more steady. "Can we come back here again?" she asked. Naomi looked around, then back at her daughter. "We won't need to," she said, "because by then, it won't be this hotel that changes. It'll be all of them." And with that, the 2 of them stepped through the rotating glass doors, walking not into the world as it was, but into the one they were helping shape. 2 weeks later, the Eden Lux corporate headquarters released a video message that played across every hotel in the chain, from lobbies in Miami to front desks in Chicago, even the housekeeping lounges in Denver. The same message echoed across screens, subtle but firm. Dr. Naomi Ellis appeared on camera in a navy blazer, sitting behind a simple desk with no logos, no flags, just a plain background and her voice. Her words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. They were clear. Hospitality is not just service. It's a promise that no matter who you are or where you come from, the moment you walk through our doors, you're respected, seen, valued. If we can't guarantee that, we're not in the business of hospitality at all. That video, less than 3 minutes long, was downloaded, shared, reposted, and discussed on morning news shows and within corporate leadership boards nationwide. Not because it was flashy, but because it felt like truth, real truth, quiet, undeniable, and long overdue within a month. The Equal First Impressions program had launched at all U.S. properties under Eden Lux. Staff retraining became mandatory. Anonymous reporting tools were installed. And every general manager, from coast to coast, now reported directly to a newly created Division of Equity and Guest Protection. For the first time, anti-bias accountability wasn't a memo. It was part of the job, but back in Atlanta, in the same city where it all began. Something quieter had taken root. Ava Ellis sat at her desk after school, writing an essay for her 7th grade class. The prompt had been simple. Write about a day that changed your view of the world. But what Ava put on paper wasn't simple at all. Her handwriting wavered at first, then steadied. Her words began like this. I used to think grown-ups always knew what was right, but then I saw them get it wrong, badly. I saw my mom get ignored, disrespected, and nearly thrown out of a hotel she helped build. And I saw people try to justify it with rules that were never meant to be fair. But I also saw her fix it. Not with yelling, not with threats, just by standing still until the truth caught up. That's the day I learned power isn't loud, it's quiet, but it doesn't move. Naomi found the essay later that evening, resting on the dining table next to Ava's backpack. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her daughter's words had done something even stronger. They had closed the loop. The fear that Ava had felt in that hotel lobby, that she might walk into the world unwanted or invisible, was already fading. In its place, something far more powerful had taken root. Clarity, voice, presence. A few days after that, the hotel installed a permanent plaque at the front desk. It wasn't large, just brass, polished, and subtle, but its message was unmistakable. Every guest is a VIP, no exceptions. And beneath that line, engraved in quiet capital letters, it read, Dr. Naomi W. Ellis, CEO. Most guests didn't notice it at first, but the ones who did, they paused. Some took photos. Some nodded to themselves. A few just stood there a while, letting the words sink in. Because those words weren't just corporate branding. They were a warning and a promise. Linda Owens, now promoted to full-time front office supervisor, stood by that plaque often, not to show it off, but to remember. She trained her new team differently. She reminded them not just of policies, but of presence. You treat the person in front of you like they belong here, she'd say, because the second you start deciding who looks worthy, you're in the wrong business. And the new team listened. They weren't perfect, but they tried harder, looked people in the eye, measured guests by how they carried themselves, not by how they looked. And when mistakes happened, they owned them. Months later, Naomi returned briefly to Atlanta for a speaking engagement. She didn't stay at the hotel. She didn't need to, but she did stop by. Quietly. No entourage, no press. Just her and Ava. Now more confident. Now standing taller. The two walked through the lobby as guests, unnoticed at first, just like before. But this time, the experience was different. A warm welcome, genuine eye contact. No hesitation when Naomi's name came up on the reservation system. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And sometimes, progress is the real win. As they walked out through the tall glass doors, Ava turned to her mom and asked, "Do you think they remember?" Naomi looked around and smiled. "They don't have to remember me," she said. "They just have to remember how to treat people. That's enough." And with that, they stepped into the sunlight, not as victims of a moment, but as architects of a standard, one that didn't just change a hotel, it changed the people inside it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful true life stories, and share this message of dignity and justice with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching, and remember, respect isn't optional, it's the minimum.